Hello again and welcome to another Morty and Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode, we shall be reviewing some more dispatches from the front lines. That's right, it's time for another Tournament After Action report. And this one is going out to all of my favourite gas mask boys, the Shovel Enthusiast Club, for I took a pure Deathcore of Krieg style army to a tournament. We had waves of infantry, we had crashing barrages of artillery, and of course, we had some pretty badass Malcador tanks thrown into the mix as well. And let me tell you, not only was this a very fun event, but it was also a pretty interesting one because I took a couple of new units, things that I have only theory crafted before, but finally got the opportunity to field test. And they did not disappoint. And with that foreshadowing hanging in the air, let's not mess around any further. Let's fix bayonets, equip our shovels, and charge out into no man's land and right into today's episode. As is tradition, I want to start off this video with a few brief thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to the tournament organisers and hosts and venue of this event, Just Play. If you have seen some of my tournament reports before, you'll be familiar with the Just Play people. They always put on a really good RTT, and you know what? This was no exception. The terrain was on point, the round timings were fantastic, and overall, there was nothing to complain about and a lot to enjoy. I also want to say a big thank you to my opponents because they were a joy to play against, and to be honest, I want to shout out the Just Play community in general. I've been going there for a little while now, and it has quickly become my favorite place to do tournaments. And a big part of that is the community, is the people that play there regularly. So if you're looking for a good hobby store to hang out in, and you're looking for some great people to play with, then I can highly recommend Just Play in Liverpool. It's just overall a top tier gaming establishment, venue, and community. But with all of that said, now let's get into the video proper, and we shall begin with the list overview. As per normal, I have done a separate video covering this list in detail, and there'll be a link to that down in the description below. But I'll give you a brief summary of it now. I took 3 units of Deathcore of Krieg, 20 man strong each, and I had a Deathcore Marshal leading each one. Each Deathcore Marshal had a plasma pistol and a power sword. Each Krieg blob had double plasma gun, double melter gun, double grenade launcher, and a sergeant with a plasma pistol and power sword. 2 of those, to be clear. And I also had a Krieg medipack in there. Very much the standard take all comers tournament loadout for my Krieg blobs. I then had a 4th blob, which was my Supreme Command blob. I had a Lord Solar in there, I had a unit of Catachans, and I had a platoon command squad. They are simply there to act as an HQ for my officers and to allow me to do orders for my vehicles 24 inches away, with Leontas taking advantage of the platoon command squad's master box. This gave me 3 frontline blobs, but also kind of like a 4th backup blob if I really need to shove a bit more infantry into the mix. So plenty of screening available. I then backed this infantry up with some good tanks and artillery. I had 3 basilisks. This is the second time that I've run 3 basilisks, and I have become incredibly impressed with them. They are a fantastic artillery piece, and massing them up like this allows them to inherently get past their weakness of only being sort of strength 8 and damage 2, because they can spam the damage onto one unit. They can really build it up, but also most importantly, it allows me to really debilitate and cripple my opponent's infantry by reducing their movement by 2, their advance by 2, and their charge rolls by 2, thanks to the vast amount of Earthshaker shells that this list has available. Finally, we get to what very well may be the most interesting part of the list, and that is the heavy armor. I figured I was running Krieg, and if you're going to run Krieg, you've got to run something that makes this list stand out, makes it a little bit different. Otherwise, it's just like a hybrid guard army that's running Krieg infantry. And I've done that loads of times before. So what I took this time was Malcador tanks. I had 2 regular Malcadors with Malcador battle cannons and triple las cannon. I went for this configuration because I figured the battle cannon would give me the volume and the ability to take on most targets. Little side note, the Malcador's battle cannon is identical to the Leman Russ, except it's only strength 9. The 3 las cannons were there to give me some actual long-range anti-tank. Sure, in total in the list, I've only got 6 las cannons, but then between all the melter, plasma, grenade launchers, and earth shakers, I should have enough soft supplementary firepower that can help me deal with big stuff as it comes along. The final vehicle was the Malcador Infernus. I'm going to be real with you. There were 2 very important reasons why I took this unit. Firstly, it was slightly cheaper. Couldn't quite, without taking something else out of the list, get another 3rd Malcador in. And secondly, this Malcador is painted in my green and blue colour scheme, whereas my 3rd Malcador tank that I own is in my tan Steel Legion colour scheme. And I just wanted to have that all matching vibe, you know, rule of cool. And that's why I took it. Tactical reasons, I know that it's not a very good unit. Its flamer is a bit poo. But I figured, you know what, I'll take it to an event and I'll just abuse the shit out of the fact that this thing can fire Overwatch. So essentially it's firing twice every battle round because I'm going to fire in my turn. And thanks to its 18-inch range with the giant trombone flamer, I can then Overwatch and do it in your turn as well. Last but certainly not least, we had the fairly mandatory 2 Cyclops demolition vehicles for doing lots of secondary objective goodness. So now we have covered the list, the forces of the true Emperor's finest. Now let's get into the lay of the land. What was the format of the event and how competitive was it? So it was a 1-day 3-round RTT. There were about a dozen people at the event. The terrain is fairly tournament standard. There's plenty of ruins for you to be able to hide your army behind turn 1 to avoid alpha strikes. There's some landslide blocking in the middle, and then there are some forest equivalents on the flanks. This means that you can avoid getting blown off the table turn 1, but if you want to move out, you are going to have to take some risks. I would say that overall, at Just Play, their terrain does slightly favour shooting armies, but that tends to be the meta of 10th edition as it is. As for the competitiveness of the event, it was right down the middle. It was not fluffy, it was not a Shark Tank, it was just competitive. In fact, this tournament was being used by every player there as practice for another event, a Teams GT that was happening the very following weekend. So whilst everyone was a joy to play against and there was no issues with rules or anything like that, everyone was just having a lot of fun. We were also all taking it quite seriously because we wanted to see what our list could do before the final submission for the big event that was coming up. Now that covers all of the pre-game preamble, the preamble if you will, but now let's get to the real reason why you're all here, and that is, of course, the battles. And we're going to be doing things slightly out of sequence in this video. All will become clear in the fullness of time, but we're going to begin with game number 2. So this game was against Joe and his Chaos Demons. Now, Joe was very much running what I consider to be one of the best Chaos Demon lists that you can get your hands on. It is the go-to tournament army for this faction. Essentially, it's Monster Mash, with 4 big demons being supported by various auras and buffs, and then lots of little demons running around getting the points. Specifically, there was Be'lakor, and then there was a big old Bloodthirster and Shalaxi, and then there was a Tzeentch Great Demon. I believe it is the Lord of Change. I don't think it was a named character. There was then multiple small units of minor demons. So we had some Fleshhounds. There were several units of Screamers. There was some Slaaneshi cavalry as well. And there was even a Khorne Skull Cannon, which actually worried me greatly because it can force battle shock tests onto my units. And if I fail them and then that unit is wiped out, then I wouldn't be able to use reinforcements on my blob squads, which is clearly a very important part of how all of my guard lists like to operate. I really lean into that reinforcement mechanic. The deployment for this game was sweeping engagement, and the primary objective was vital ground, and the mission rule, the twist if you will, was sweep and clear, which meant both sides had sticky objectives. I chose tactical objectives because I always choose tactical, not for any, ironically, tactical reasons, but just because I played so much of 9th edition that I kind of got sick of taking fixed objectives, and I'd always rather take tactical, even if it means I'm likely to lose a game, just because it makes it more interesting. However, Joe went for fixed objectives. He went for bring it down and engage on all fronts. This was quite a clever choice. After all, I do have a lot of vehicles, and my Cyclops demolition vehicles, well, it says it in the name, they count as vehicles, so they would go towards the points for this. You've then got things like the Malcador Infernus, which has got a relatively short range, so if it's burning you, you can probably smash it and get points for it. And then you've also got all the Basilisks, which, whilst might be difficult for you to get there with the screening, if you do get there, they are going to pop. Those great demons are going to tear through them like a hot knife through butter. And engage is also quite clever, because those big demons are going to be coming at me. And so whilst I'm busy trying to handle them, little demons can run around, hide behind terrain, and get engaged. Speaking of deployment, mine was fairly predictable. I had 2 years of Deathcore of Krieg up front screening. They weren't on the edge of the deployment zone because I didn't want to invite a turn 1 charge, but they weren't out of turn 1 charge range. It just would have been a very much a long bomb charge and unlikely prospect. On my right flank, I had the Malcador Infernus. This was fairly far forward. It was definitely the most exposed of my tanks, but that's okay. It's the worst one, and it needs to be up close so it can start burning. And if it starts getting rushed down, it will overwatch. In the middle, I had another Malcador, and I had another blob of Kriegers. I wasn't sure which direction these demons were going to go. They've all got wings. They can go very fast. So I figured having a concentration of forces in the middle will allow me to break left or break right and respond to wherever the threats are emerging from. On the far left, I put my last Malcador, just to have a bit of armoured support over there. And finally, in the big ruin in my deployment zone, I deployed the artillery park and the Supreme Command blob. Safe and sound, able to start bombarding and ordering the comfort of their makeshift command bunker. All of the big demons were huddled around Be'lakor, who went slap bang in the middle of the deployment zone. Joe, of course, wanted to see where the ebb and flow of the game would go, and he might want to pick whether he wants to go left or right. He has the movement advantage over me, so going in the middle is definitely a good choice here. He then had all of his little demons scattered out onto the other parts of his deployment zone, and he did this so he could start getting engaged on all fronts early on. With all of our units down and ready to rumble, it was time for the first turn roll-off. And naturally, sir, as is my tradition, as seems to be the way, I went second. I always go second on the first game at a tournament. I always go second in most games at tournaments. I sometimes get to go first in like one game, but it's never the first game. I always deploy as if I'm going second because it's just this uncanny thing that happens. And so I went second, and Joe's first turn was actually very quick. His little demons, using like scout moves and other various moves, go into the 2 table quarters that he needs for engage. Obviously he needs 3. He does have a small unit of flesh hounds that stay back in his home table quarter as well. And then I think he makes a little bit of a mistake. He plays it cagey with the big boys. Now, bear in mind, I think that one of the big demons was in Deep Strike. But I think he was waiting for it to come down, and I think maybe there was some thoughts about being able to teleport, because I know that you can teleport the demons around at the end of my turn. But I think that if you're going to take Be'lakor and you're going to take a big load of greater demons that are going to come charging at me, and if you want to keep me distracted, you need to come at me. But he played it quite cagey, and he tentatively moved forward with Be'lakor, guaranteeing that I wouldn't be able to get into 18-inch range with most of my firepower. But Probably, I mean, I was way out of range. He could have come a lot further forward and still guaranteed that the best firepower I would have had at him would maybe been one Krieg blob. But as it was, he decided to play it safe, go for the engage points, and see what would happen turn 2 when he could bring the full might of his greater demonic powers onto the tabletop. It comes over to my first turn, and I instigate Operation Demon Frustrator. See, I've played against demons quite a lot. I've played against Monster Mash in its various forms across various factions quite a lot as well. And once you've got the measure of this kind of army, there are some fairly straightforward steps you can take to kind of throw a spanner in their works. I understood what Joe wanted to do. I understood that his big demons were going to distract me whilst his little stuff scored the points. And what I've learned when you encounter armies like this is you just need to tie up the big stuff. You just need to push it back a little bit, slow it down. And what you really need to focus on is the little buggers. So what I did is I pushed forward one Krieg blob on the left-hand side, and I pushed another Krieg blob on the right-hand side, and then my middle Krieg blob just moved forward a little bit, trying to tempt him in for maybe a charge or whatnot. But again, making it so it would be a very long charge for him to get, if he could get it at all. Then it came over to my shooting, and all of my shooting stoically refused to go after any of the great demons. Most of it I couldn't shoot anyway because of Be'lakor, but Fleshhounds, the Slaaneshi Cavalry, the Screamers, all of that was fair game. My Basilisk concentrated on the Fleshhounds and took them out early on, and then I had one Basilisk that rolled really, really well, which I put Take Aim on my Basilisk, by the way, because Malcador didn't really have a lot of great targets. And that meant they were hitting on 3s. And so my other Basilisk got like 9 shots, and then it just got all the hits and auto wounds, all that kind of stuff. And I wiped out the unit of Slaaneshi Cavalry as well. This meant that there were 2 units of Screamers, and there was a unit of Nurglings around there too. The Malcador Infernus burned the Nurglings. Didn't quite kill all of them. There was one base left. And then I took my 2 blobs of infantry, the one on the right, the one on the left, and I charged them into the Screamers. Screamers really aren't what they once were. I still have PTSD around Screamer style from like 5th and 6th and 7th edition, but honestly, they are a shadow of their former self. And so I charged into these Screamers, and the reason I did this is it was going to screw over Joe on the primary. But also, one of my objectives was Tempting Target, which had been the objective which was in the top left from my perspective. And so by charging onto that, I had taken the objective off the Screamers, and I secured my own Tempting Target, and I was also able to bludgeon most of the Screamers down there. I think I killed 1 from one unit, and I killed 2 from the other unit. But that's really it for my turn 1. I start damaging the minor demons, and the big demons kind of get left alone. We go over to turn 2 for Joe, and the big boys start coming out to play. The Tzeentch grade to demon flies over towards the top left objective, the one that I've just taken for my Tempting Target. I'm in the midst of combat with his Screamers, and it gets ready to start launching magic into me over there. We then have got Be'lakor, who moves towards the middle of the board, and then the Bloodthirster comes down from reserve. And then at the end of my turn, Shalaxi had been on the board, and then she went back into the sky for teleportation purposes. I'm not sure why she went back in the sky, to be honest. I think Joe had a plan with using her to come down once he had control of the middle board again. But as it was, I didn't have all 4 to worry about when it would eventually come over to my turn 2. It goes over to demon shooting. Joe falls back with his Screamers, because they can fall back. They've got flies, so they just go wee, and they just fly out of there. And he falls back, so we still sat on the objectives, but now he can do a bit of damage to me. The Skull Cannon manages to kill a few from the right-hand Krieg blob, and the Tzeentch demon does do a fair amount of damage to my Kriegers on the top left. But between some lucky saves for me and the fact that I hadn't needed to use reinforcements turn 1, I had a CP left over, so I could do like Inspired Command in Joe's turn for take cover on that blob. I was able to save a fair few. The Feel No Pain kicked in a few lucky ways, and so I didn't get completely dominated by the Tzeentch Demon. I took maybe just over half a dozen casualties on that top blob. The Bloodthirster goes for a long bomb charge, and even with a reroll, isn't able to get it. To be fair, Joe was looking for either 10 or 11, but dice were just not forthcoming this time. Going into turn 2 for the Emperor's True Finest, and I was surprised at how little damage I'd taken up until this point. Through effective screening and essentially forcing the demons to spread out as I begin dominating on the few primary objectives that they are, it's causing the demons to have to spread themselves kind of thin, and they are losing one of their greatest advantages over their guard, which is force concentration. I've talked about force concentration before on another one of my videos, but there's not many minor demons left for me to go for, and the big demons that are on the board are pretty much safe thanks to the Be'lakor, or them just being a Tzeentch Demon. Big Tzeentch Demon with lots of wound and a 4 vulnerable save. But what I end up doing is using my firepower to just wipe out every minor demon on the board. Every Screamer, every Nurgling, any scrap that's left over, just I focus on all of that. To be fair, I actually have quite a cold turn. The Malcador just finishes off the Nurglings. That's all it really manages to do. And then we have the firepower from my infantry. Doesn't even manage to scratch the Screamers. I'm just doing... I roll quite badly my turn 2. But fortunately, because I've got Malcadors, Plasma Guns, Melter Guns, because I've got Lasbolts, because I've got Artillery, I've got Basilisk... Fortunately, just through sheer brute force, I managed to push my way through the cold dice. And by the end of turn number 2, there is no minor demons left on the board. This is a really big deal and an absolute nightmare scenario for Joe, because it's going to make his engage on all fronts really difficult to do now, and if he does do it, it's going to be hyper inefficient. He's going to have several 100-point greater demons sitting in table quarters, getting him 2 points a turn for engage. It's just not what he wants to do, and it also is going to force him to spread even further away from Be'lakor, and he has to do this because I am just putting multiple tens of OC. I'm putting 20, 40 OC, if not more, onto these primary objectives, and he just can't get rid of them with his big boys. Like, he's just not getting through my guys quick enough. It's turn 3, he's not made contact yet. It's just becoming a little bit of a nightmare. So Joe does decide to go balls deep. It's time to take the gloves off, get stuck in, and start smashing these guard boys up. Bloodthirster comes barreling into a unit of Kriegers and almost wipes them out. Gets them down to about 5 models, and then in my turn, when I do fall back from the Bloodthirster, it's the end of the fight phase, it does a whole bunch of mortal wounds and brings me down to just the Medipack guy and the Deathcore Marshal in that unit. Over on the right hand side, Be'lakor and Shalaxi move, shoot, and then charge another one of my Krieg blobs, and again don't quite wipe them out, but do bring them down to 6 models, including the Deathcore Marshal. The Tzeentch Demon continues to spray psychic fire and God knows only what else into my Krieg blob, but it has a cold turn and it only kills about 5 or 6 models, most of which actually come back in my turn when I start using my Krieg Medipacks. And so I think I lose 5 models and 3 of them come back from that. So I'm kind of holding on over there. But the highlight of the match, and what I think is the funniest moment in this game, is when Joe brought the Changeling in. I think I forgot to mention this in the list overview, but he had a Changeling in the army. And I left a gap in my back right hand corner, so the Changeling could drop in, and this would get Joe some more gauge points. Good. And it drops in, and I go, I'm going to Overwatch you with the Malcador. And he's like, okay. I said, are you sure you want to drop there? Because, you know, having a good game, and he might have forgotten that this thing can Overwatch. Because it's a big tank, he might have thought it was like Titanic and it can't Overwatch. And he's like, no, I want to drop here. I need to do it for points. And I'm like, okay, just want to double check, because obviously this thing has got a flamer. And he's like, we have to take a battle shot test, a leadership test. Otherwise, you can't shoot at the changeling. And I was like, all right, fair enough. This might mean that I don't get to shoot you. So I roll my dice, and the Malcador rolls really high. He rolls like a 5 and a 6. So no issues, read the battle shock. And then the Malcador just proceeds to unload the entire goddamn fuel Bowser onto the changeling. I roll a 6 for the number of shots from the giant trombone flamer. And then I roll a 4 and a 5 for the number of shots coming out of the heavy flamers. Needless to say, considering all of those auto hit and they all wound on 3s, there was naught left of the changeling but a little bit of singed and very crispy robe. I can just imagine Tzeentch turning to the changeling in the Immaterium, one of his favoured demons, and says, "Go forth, there's a great task you must perform. Step through this portal, and when you have completed it, come back to me." The changeling bows and steps through the portal. And about 5 seconds pass. The changeling comes back completely burned from head to toe, just furious with Tzeentch, who's sat there cackling whilst another fantastic troll has been carried out on the universe. So at the end of Demon Turn 3, I did have all 4 big boys in my face, and they had done some significant damage. 2 of my Krieg blobs had almost been wiped out, and the last one was down to about half now, and it's facing down a Tzeentchian Greater Demon. But 2 of those Greater Demons are now out in front of my gun line, and they are not protected by Be'lakor. Bloodthirster in the center is just rocking and rolling, and so is the Tzeentch one. And I decide that I'm just going to put some firepower into these things. We'll see what happens. My infantry blob that's been getting flamed by the Lord of Change gets 3 of its guys back, which is awesome, and it stays still because it wants to get the lethal hits. In the center, I fall back from the Bloodthirster, and I'm able to regain 3 people back into that squad. And on the right-hand side, I'm able to fall back, and I'm able to regain 2 people back into that squad. This turn, I do use my Deathcore Marshal's ability on both of those shattered units to guarantee that I do pass the battle shock test. But that trick is done now, and I can't do it again in the game. It then comes over to the shooting phase. And I start off with the infantry squad on the top left, and they smash it. Between hitting on 2s and staying still for lethal hits, and the fact that the Tzeentch Demon only has a 4+ invulnerable save, and I take a lot of wounds off that thing. A couple of melter guns go through. One of them makes it all the way to the damage point. I'm in half range with the melter gun, and I slap 7 wounds straight off the demon in one go. The plasma storm starts rolling with the plasma pistols and the plasma guns. I even overcharge the plasma pistol on the officers just to try and make sure every shot goes through. And once the infantry squad has finished doing everything, including quite a few lasgun bolts that auto wounded, and I also use the grenade stratagem because I'm rolling in CP at this point because I haven't had to use reinforcements, and I get that Greater Demon down to about 6 wounds. I then drop a Basilisk on its head, and I drop it down to dead wounds. And that thing goes back into the warp from whence it came, banished to the realm of demons and heretics. And things don't go much better for the Bloodthirster, because both Malcadors are able to draw line of sight to him easily. Those big old wings causing him a few issues. And between the fact that I think one of the Malcadors had stayed still, and both of them had take aim on them, and the las cannons, and the battle cannons, and the hunter killers, and everything, I was able to get the Bloodthirster down well below half wounds, at which point both Basilisks, main gun range, shatter their sky! And again, through furious and judicious and liberal use of high explosive artillery bombardments, we were able to send another Great Demon back to the Abyss. I do think that I got a little lucky on my dice rolls, And Joe, despite the fact that he spent a CP on a stratagem that's in reroll 1s on his invulnerable saves, he wasn't making them. 4-ups are so swingy. Sometimes, you say that they go off 50% of the time. I tend to find that they go off 50% of the time, but not in the same turn. One turn they'll be hot, and one turn they'll be not. And this turn, unfortunately, was a not turn. And lo, the age-old adage of the Guard came true once again. The Guard got hit hard, but we hit back even harder. And to be honest, end of Battle Round 3 was really the end of the game for the Demons. At this point, they have got Be'lakor, Shalaxi, and a Skull Cannon left over. They have almost no way of getting to my vehicles. I think the Malcador Furnace is the only one they can realistically destroy. And they have no way of getting their engaged north fronts. The next 2 turns can be summed up fairly quickly. Shalaxi does go after the Malcador, which burns her and then overwatched her over the course of... I think it just overwatched her actually. Takes a few wounds off her, but Shalaxi just been shooting and Choppy just beats the crap out of it. Then Be'lakor comes racing into my back lines, and because he's now within 18 inches, he gets the same treatment that the other 2 Greater Demons had got the previous turn. So Be'lakor goes down Demon turn 4. Turn 5, Shalaxi tries to make a long bomb charge on another one of the Malcadors now that my screen is pretty collapsed. Doesn't make it. Turn 5, Shalaxi goes down. And when the dust has settled and all of the scores are on the doors and we get to the end of Battle Round 5, final score is an eye-watering 96 points to the Guard, 26 points to the Demons, and unfortunately for Joe, every single Demon had been destroyed and he had been tabled. So obviously that was quite a brutal game and a significant victory for his Imperial Guard. But I didn't think it was going to go that way. I have faced Demons before, so I know how to counter them. But this list, on paper, I didn't think it had as much damage output. You know, I'm not running Double Dawn. I'm not running 4 or 5 Leman Russes. Really, I've got 2 Malcadors, which are like the same firepower as a Russ. And then I've got a Malcador Infernus, which is just a big old meme. But it still did the job. And I think the thing that brought the gold home in this case was the infantry and the artillery. The infantry was very solid. The 5-up Feel No Pain meant that I was able to hold on to those objectives. There were a number of times when if I'd had anything else, I wouldn't have been able to hold. But just by being able to take some charges, especially from big buggers like Be'lakor and Shalaxi, I feel like a lot of their damage, like damage 2 or something, and I got a few double 5s in the Feel No Pain. Yeah, it was fine. It worked out all right, especially against some of their shooting as well. I think the artillery was the big important one here. Not that Basilisks are overpowered or anything like that. I don't want GW getting the wrong end of the stick and putting Basilisks up to ridiculous points value, but just because having the artillery allowed me to have a counterplay. If I didn't have the indirect fire, then this game would have been extremely frustrating for the Guard, because I wouldn't have been able to counter someone just going fix objectives. I just couldn't have done anything. They sat in those table quarters and I never would have got near him. He would have just sat there scoring points and I have nothing that I could do about it. So the indirect fire was powerful, but if you notice on its own, it never like dominated anything. It always needed to be set up as like a 1-2 punch. You always need to weaken something and then finish it with the artillery. You always need to concentrate it in order to wipe out even a small unit of like 5 Flesh Hounds, which is not a particularly durable or expensive squad. So I did find that the infantry artillery did really well. The Malcadors really surprised me how potent they were. Triple las cannon, baby. Triple las cannon is really, really nice. Being able to soften someone up with a battle cannon and then just smash them in the face with triple las cannon was eminently enjoyable. And it got me thinking about maybe Scout Sentinels. Triple las cannon, triple hunter killer. I could do the same thing the Malcador is doing at about 70 points cheaper. certainly one to look at. I didn't really feel the Malcador's durability buffs with like its inbuilt Armor of Contempt style ability, but that's just because they rarely got targeted. But that covers game number 2. Now let's move on to game number 3, the final game of the day. And I played against Sarah and her Chaos Space Marine army. That's right, double Chaos back to back. We've dealt with the immortal foes, now we need to deal with their minions. Sarah had a really cool Chaos list, and there were definitely some powerful elements in there. Big unit of Possessed with a Master of Possession. Big unit of Terminators with Abaddon. And then we had a big unit of Legionnaires supported by a Master of Executions with Mark of Khorne just flying around all of that stuff. They had a Rhino for those Legionnaires as well. There were 2 Hellbrutes, and there were also 2 Venom Crawlers, and there was a unit of Cultists that could sit on the backfield objective. As for the mission, we had Dawn of War deployment with Chilling Rain as the ever-exciting mission twist, and then it was supply drop for the primary mission. So the objectives were going to start disappearing. Now, the objective that disappeared on turn 4 was the one that was on the far right hand side, and the one that was going to disappear on turn 5 was the one in the middle. So it was the objective that would stick around to the very end, was going to be the one on the far left. As for player deployment, mine was very similar to the last one. I had the artillery park behind the ruin. I had the Supreme Command blob in the ruin as well. I then had a Malcador on the left-hand flank, a Malcador at the back middle, and I had my Malcador Infernus all the way on the right-hand side by itself. I thought, screw it, let's just get this boy moving forward and burning the crap out of people. My infantry, there were 2 units of Krieg spread out in front as a screening line, and then there was a unit that was on the board, but just sort of behind the front line in reserve, not strategic reserve, but sort of on the board reserve, as it were, ready to plug the gaps where they may occur. Sarah put her Possessed on my right-hand flank with a Hellbrute, and then there was the big Abaddon unit with the Terminators bang in the center, Cultists on an objective in the center as well, and then there was a Hellbrute that was with Abaddon's unit, and then the 2 Venom Crawlers and the Legionnaires in the Rhino were on the left-hand flank from my perspective. We then roll off for first term, and praise be to the Emperor! It's only gone and happened again! I actually got to go first in a game of Warhammer 40k. Oh! It never happens, but when it does, it's a beautiful thing to behold. And I really wanted turn 1. Because I'm looking down at all of these infantry units that are starting on the board. I mean, fair enough, the Legionnaires are in the Rhino. But I'm looking down a lot of infantry. And I'm looking down at a lot of Basilisks. And I'm looking down at a lot of Earthshaker shells. First thing I do, move up the Malcador Infernus. I had measured so that it was exactly 28 inches away from the Possessed. Moved them forward, down the flank. Was able to get a little Bernie onto the Possessed. I did then proceed to burn the Possessed and killed one of them. Well done, Malcador. Continuing as ever to do basically nothing. Last game it killed some Nurglings. This game it killed a Possessed. Nice. We then had the rest of my army, and I decided I was going to concentrate, now that I knew where the Omega objective, whatever one it is, the one that's going to be around at the end, was going to be, and I knew it was on the left-hand flank. I was like, well, I'm just going to go to the left-hand flank. Screw the center, screw the right. The Malcador can distract, the Infernus can distract people over there. I'm going to focus on having the objective that's on the left, because that's the one that's going to be around the most anyway. So I moved forward 2 units of infantry, still screening, but in a position where I'm on the objective with one of my big blobs of Krieg. And then my Malcadors, both of them target the Legionnaire's Rhino. I am able to blow up the Legionnaire's Rhino between both Malcadors, and then I proceed to drop a Basilisk on top of them. Basilisk, a couple of the Legionnaires die on the way out, and the Basilisk gets a couple more, taking a 10-man squad, well, 11 with a character, down to a 7-man squad. And then I also drop a Basilisk onto the Possessed as well. That manages to kill one more of the Possessed and also slows them down, making it much more difficult and unlikely for them to come after my Infernus. I mean, they are going to go for the Infernus, it's the only target they've got, but a bit of a nightmare. They've lost a couple of their guys, and I can overwatch them when they start coming at me. So yeah, as a whole, those Possessed are not having a great time. And then I go to shoot at a Abaddon's unit, and I say I'm going to shoot my Basilisk at a Abaddon's unit, and Sarah's like, okay, go ahead. And I'm like, don't you have like a stratagem that you can use to make it so I can't target a Abaddon's unit? And she's like, I do. And I said, do you want to use it now? Because if you do it, it means I won't be able to target him with the Earthshaker shells, and that'll slow him down. And Sarah goes, I do want to use it, but I've got some plans in mind for my CP, and I've only got one on me right now. So I'm gonna wear it. I don't think you're going to do that much damage to Abaddon, and you might slow him down a bit, but then I'll have the CP that I need for later on. And I was like, okay, that's fair enough. But I wanted to make sure, because obviously slowing down a unit of Terminators can be quite a big deal. But at the end of the day, these guys have got loads of bolters, and they've got guns and everything, so it's not so bad. So I end up Basilisking Abaddon's unit, and that means that the Possessed, Abaddon, and the Legionnaires are now all slowed down. Now, personally, I do believe it was a mistake. Let me slow Abaddon's unit down. I think the Possessed and the Legionnaires can't really do much about that, but letting me slow Abaddon's unit down when they're Terminators, when that unit is about 800 points worth of your army, I think you just want to protect that every single turn. But again, I don't play Chaos, so I don't know if I don't know what the other stratagems could have been. I don't know what the combos may have been there. So please let me know down in the comment section below. Obviously, politely and respectfully, because like I said, we don't want to, you know, I think it's a mistake, but I could easily be wrong. Let me know down in the comment section below if you would have spent the CP on Abaddon's unit, make it so I couldn't shoot it, because he has all of the marks, so I believe you can use the stratagem on that squad. But with the mobility of the Chaos army now seriously jeopardized, we do go over to their first turn. The Possessed move out, and they now go 7 inches, and then they roll an advanced move, and they roll a 3. They've been Basilisked. Oh, only go an extra inch. They move forward, and then they jump out of the ruin. They do manage to get, oh no, I think they rolled a 3 in total, so they went 10 inches, sorry, so they rolled a 5. So they do get onto the objective, and they've got more OC on my objective than I'm likely to get on there with my Malcador. But for their troubles, I am going to overwatch them. I do overwatch them, and I do manage to kill 2 more of them. Between the giant mutant trombone and the heavy flamers and whatnot, I am able to actually kill a couple of the Possessed. So that unit's now down to like 2 Possessed in the mass possession, which is not an overly scary threat. And then you've got the Terminator in the middle, which waddle forward. They do unleash a hell of a lot of firepower onto my Malcador Infernus, and they've got like lethal hits and sustained hits and full rerolls. There's a lot going on, and they actually do manage to strip 6 wounds off Malcador Infernus, which is not bad with Bolt of Fire, not bad at all. I think Abaddon gets quite a few of those himself. It might have even been 8 wounds. It was quite a lot. It was a very respectable showing. And then we get over to the Legionnaires, and they move and they advance, but they're not going anywhere fast. And so unfortunately, they don't manage to get any kind of charges off or anything against me that first turn. And they've kind of exposed themselves a little bit trying to do so. One of the Venom Crawlers goes into the middle objective, and one of the Venom Crawlers actually charges into one of my Krieg blobs that's on the left-hand side objective, the one that's going to be around at the end of the game. Does a very respectable amount of damage. Venom Crawler, between shooting and charging, does manage to kill, I think, about 8 or 9 of the Kriegers. Oh, I should have mentioned one more thing in the Chaos turn. The Possessed decide not to go for a charge on the Malcador because they wanted to do, it was either cleanse or it was hold an objective. It was one of the middle ones where you want to hold one of the middle objectives so you can get some points. There was some objective secondary involved there. So that's why they moved on to the objective. They stayed there, but they didn't go for the charge because it would have meant they wouldn't have been able to get the points on the secondaries. But we then come over to guard turn 2. And I'm in a pretty comfortable position. I'm not going to lie. The Possessed are 1 Malkador and Basilisk Bombardment away from going down. And the Legionnaires are kind of out exposed. And the Venom Crawlers, well, they're pretty small demon engines. They've got like 9 wounds each. They're toughness 9. Sure, they've got a Fire of Invuln, but that's not so bad. So in my turn 2, I decide to just drop a Basilisk Shell on the Legionnaires again. And I also use the Malkador, one of the Malkadors on them as well. And that is able to whittle them down. They're not completely wiped out, but there's 3 men left in the squad at that point. I then, between the Malkador Infernus and the Basilisk, I do manage to wipe out the Possessed. And I did have Assassinate as one of my secondaries, so that helped over there for sure. And in the middle, I drop a Basilisk Shell on a Baden's unit again. Once again, I'm very respectful. I do say, are you sure you want me to do this? You could use stratagem to stop me. And she's like, no, I want to use my stratagems for X, Y, that I've got a combo in mind. I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I drop the Basilisk Shell onto Abaddon, which does slow him down again. I then fire one of my Malkadors and an infantry squad at one Venom Crawler, and I am able to destroy it. And then I fire another infantry squad. I think I fired 2 Bas at this point, one into the Legionnaires. So I fired all 3 Basilisks. So I had another Malkador that went into the other Venom Crawler, and those las cannons just smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. Just fired triple las cannon, 3 hits, 3 wounds, 3 go through, boom, dead. So both Venom Crawlers are down, the Possessed are down, and the Legionnaires have been made combat ineffective. It's not a lot left on the Chaos side. The thing is, you've got Abaddon left. And Abaddon's unit has taken like 1 casualty at this point. So like 800 points of the Chaos army is still fully intact. And you've also got there's like a couple of characters in the Legionnaires unit. And there's the Hellbrutes and the Cults. So there's still a lot going on. But I'm really under no threat at this point. And so this kind of plays out how I expect it to at this point. Abaddon's unit finally moves forward. They've been using a strategy where they can move and advance and still shoot and charge and everything. They finally move forward. They finally get into the middle of the board. And they dagger down the crap out of one of my Krieg units. Really, really badly damage it, but don't wipe it out. And so, but that's all that happens. It's just this blob of Abaddon and a Hellbrute just moving inexorably into the middle of the board. And then there's a unit of cultists sat on one objective, and there's a Hellbrute that's now facing down my Malkador. The Hellbrute actually injured itself on its Dark Pact quite badly, and it's left on like 5 or 6 wounds. That's about it. Turn 2 for the Chaos, really, there wasn't a lot left they could do. They've lost a lot of small units for doing secondaries. They've just got so much tied up in this Abaddon brick, and I'm just stoically refusing to kill it. Again, I've faced off against a lot of Death Star style armies in my time. I'm not trying to big myself up. I'm not trying to wank myself off here, guys. I'm just saying I've faced off against this Death Stars where you take a big unit and you stack characters and everything into it, and it's like half your army, and it's unstoppable and it's unkillable. You can only be in one place at once. And this one, I'm basically slowing down every turn, and I'm just killing everything around it. It's similar tactics to last time. You know, I'm not getting drawn in, not getting distracted by the big horrible thing. I'm letting the big horrible thing do what it wants. I'm still messing with it, whilst the rest of the army gets picked apart. And so that's what happens going into my turn 3. The Malkador Infernus actually single-handedly manages to kill the Hellbrute that injured itself. And then the remaining Legionnaires and the couple of characters that were attached there, I think one was a Massive Executions and one was an Exalted Champion or Aspiring Champion. They just get flattened by like the 40 Guardsmen and 2 Malkadors that are facing them. And so we get to the end of turn 3, and the Cultists, I think, they die to like triple Basilisk Bombardment, just boom, 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 or double Basilisk Bombardment, and then there was one Basilisk that again slowed Abaddon's unit down. So we get to the end of Guard turn 3, and there's just Abaddon and his chosen bozos in the middle of the board. And they do get into the middle, and they do do the shooty thing with the bolts and everything. But I've pulled back 1 Krieg blob, and I got like 3 back with the medipacks. That unit's up to like half strength again now, and or if not higher. And so there's like all these bolter shots go into one of my regular Malcadors, which just tanks it because it's on a 2-up save. And even when Abaddon shoots with like his AP-2 Mega Bolter, it's on a 2-up save because it's in cover with its inbuilt pseudo armor of contempt. So it doesn't take any damage. I think maybe like 1 or 2 wounds plink off, but that was it. And unfortunately, you guys can probably see where this game's going to go. It was a massacre. The next 2 turns, I proceed to bombard, shoot. You know, Abaddon's unit is just now in the middle of the board, so it's quite easy for me to get access to it with my infantry and my artillery and everything. And so essentially I just spend the next few turns, turn 4, everything that can moves as close as possible to it. Even my artillery is like coming forward at this point just to make sure that if any stratagems do get played, I can still bombard it. And so over the course of turn 4 and turn 5, Abaddon's unit is flattened into the ground, slowed down, its move blocked by various things, and it is a chaos tabling again. The minions of the Dark Gods did not have a good time against the Death Corps of Krieg. I'm just saying, if these particular Kriegers had been at Vrax, I think it would have been over in a day, boys. It was brutal. And the final score reflected it. I think it was 100 points to the Guard, to 18 for the Chaos, which is the most one-sided game I have had in a very, very long time. I just want to say a big thank you to Sarah for the great game. That could have been a very salty and sad affair, but it wasn't. She had a smile on her face the whole time, she took it in a stride and turned what could have been quite an unenjoyable experience for both players into actually a really fun game. Now, with it being tournament practice and with us finishing with about an hour to spare, Sarah and I did have a bit of a chat post-game whilst we were packing up models, you know, talking about what we thought was good, what we thought was bad. And I said a little bit of feedback. I said, please, bear in mind, I don't know Chaos, so this might not be relevant to thinking of. So just feel free to discard it. But I said what I would have done if I was hers, I would have concentrated my forces. I feel like she was quite spread out. Whereas I actually had my forces quite well concentrated, where she was on all 3 objectives. I just basically focused on 2. And I also said that I definitely would have done everything I could to keep the Abaddon blob operating at maximum output. Being able to, considering that if it can move, advance, shoot, charge, no dramas, being able to do that without the Basilisk constantly knocking off essentially 4 of your movement every turn definitely would have been potent. And I think Abaddon's unit could have got into my lines quite early on. I think we could have seen a turn 2 charge from that, and that would have put me under a lot of pressure and would have forced me to deal with the Abaddon unit whilst the other bits in the list are then doing what they want to do, which is scoring points. Now, I want to make something abundantly clear. I'm not pointing out my opponent's mistakes to be mean to them or anything like that. Not at all. I make a shed load of mistakes in my games, and I always try and learn from them. And that's really what I want to do. I want to share my perspective on what I thought could have gone differently in the game, and maybe a mistake that was made either side, either way, just so that collectively the people watching this video, we can all learn from it. And so next time you go against Guard and you think about spreading out, you can be like, no, remember, Morning said force concentration. Or next time you think about going for like a big monster mash, you're like, right, need to be getting in there early on, no holding back, that kind of stuff. So it's very much done from the perspective of let's all learn together, and as a community, we can all get better at this game that we know and love, which is Warhammer 40k. Now that covers game number 2 and game number 3. Let's now go back to game number 1. And unfortunately, there is no game number 1. I set off with plenty of time to get to the gaming venue, but unfortunately, on my way there was an accident on the motorway, or highway if you're an American, and it completely closed it down. And so despite the fact that it normally takes me 25 minutes to get to Just Play, and it took me an hour and 20 minutes to get there via an alternative route because the road was closed down. There was all sorts of diversions. There'd been quite a serious accident. The entire motorway was closed off for the majority of the day, and so I did miss round 1, unfortunately. However, I did ring up the TO ahead of time, when I knew what was going to happen, and said, I'm not going to make it the first round. Please do the first round without me, and I'll get there when I get there. And fortunately, they did have a bye player on standby who was able to jump in, and so nobody missed out on a game except for me, which is the best possible outcome. I would hate for my opponent to miss out on a round because of something outside of their control. And the cool thing is that the bye player was running an absolute meme list, and he had 3 Hammerfall bunkers. What an absolute giga chad. So, as far as I'm concerned, my opponent probably had a much more fun game playing into those Hammerfall bunkers than he would have done facing the grueling infantry warfare of the Krieg. And so we get to the end of another tournament after action report. I know this one was a little bit funny with missing out the one game, but I hope that you guys still enjoyed it and there were a few things that you were able to take away from it. Me personally, I found the Malcador to be really, really good. It's still probably overcosted at 250 points, but I really like the triple las cannon. And like I said, it has some implications. It's got me having some thoughts and some thunks, other units that can spam las cannons on a reliable, movable armored chassis. I really enjoyed using my Krieg infantry again as well. The last tournament I went to, I used a World War I list, but I didn't use Krieg. I went for more of a conscript style list, and it just felt good having the Krieger boys back. I have tried using other infantry, and they are perfectly usable, and they're really, really good, but the Kriegers are just a cut above the rest. With grim demeanor and just so many special weapons packed into the squad, they are not only good at screening, not only good at holding objectives, but also quite good doing damage as well. Basilisks were an A tier unit for me. Again, I think they are perfect. They're great at dealing with armies that have got lots of infantry, but they tend to struggle into armies with lots of vehicles, even against things like Hellbrutes and stuff like that. Not particularly durable, like hell cannons and stuff like skull cannons. I had to concentrate all 3 of them to even scratch the paint, and again, they couldn't do it on their own. Their main thing is they slow people down, and it's a very powerful ability, but if the enemy doesn't have a lot of infantry, then basilisks aren't all that scary. But still, I would say that, especially in that last game, that game number 3, having the basilisks is really what gave me a huge advantage. The basilisk great, Krieger's great, Malcador's great. Last thing to mention, of course, is the Malcador Infernus. It was fun. It was a blast. Didn't really get to use its ability. It got one chance to do it when Shalaxi killed it. I rolled a 2, so it didn't do it. But it went around and it burned stuff. I think my favorite thing about it was just the fact that it auto hit. And again, it's kind of put me on, got my thoughts thunking again, other auto hit weapons. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the likes of Hellhounds and whatnot. And yeah, they're probably a bit overcosted, but it is nice when you just roll to wound. Especially with guard, not having to rely on orders and just being able to, that was the big thing about it. It didn't need orders to get the job done. It just floated around on a flank and crisped a few things up before kind of not really doing anything else. And in that 3rd game, it was great. It burned a bunch of possess and then sat on an objective most of the game. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Did you enjoy this Krieg list, or would you have swapped something out? Maybe one of the Malcadors to get some cavalry in there, the classic Death Riders. And also, let me know what other kinds of army you want to see me take to scene. I do have lots of guard armies. I can pretty much run most units, and I also have some crazy things like full Tyranid Unending Swarm. I do own 120 Hormagaunts and 240 Termagants, so I can do a carpet of bugs if you'd like to see that. But I've also got things like Tau, Gene Silical, Black Templars, and all sorts of other bits and bobs. So let me know what kind of armies you want to see at the next. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, and they have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a big shout out to Bonbon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys so much. Your incredible generosity is a massive part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and it is a big driving force behind the channel. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.